welcome on this really crazy of a day weather. Appreciate you braving the cold and rain outside to join us today this morning for this really important, in many ways, historic event where we present the report, A Community of Contrasts, which highlights the growth of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders here in the greater Cleveland area. The report is significant for it shows in concrete numbers and figures the rise of Asian American community in this region. Shortly you will hear about some key aspects of the report provided by Marita Hubanes from the Asian American Justice Center. Followed by that, there will be a moderated two-part policy conversation with communities and experts in the field who will be joining us here on the panel. Thereafter, we will open it up to the audience for some question and answer. This will be an opportunity for you to, after reflecting on the comments of the panelists, to ask any questions that you may have to the experts that are going to be here. Before I go on to present bring our local public officials up to the stage, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the many folks that helped to make this event possible. I want to thank MDI for helping us with the communications and the press equipment and all that this morning. I also want to thank Radhika Reddy and Aero Ventures and Aero International Center for hosting this event. Also, I want to give a big round of applause to Lisa Wong for helping to set up this morning. In addition to that, we have some wonderful goodies in the back that I think Beyond Family and Asia Plaza put together, so I want to thank them all. And now I'd like to ask Ariella Brown from Congresswoman Marsha Fudge's office, Yvonne Conwell, our Cuyahoga County Councilwoman, and Mr. Jeff Johnson, our City of Cleveland Councilman, to come up to this stage. So I'd like to have each of them give their brief remarks this morning before we start with the panel presentation.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm pleased to be here on behalf of your Congresswoman Marsha L. Fudge. I also have my colleague here, Belinda Prince. She's the Communications Director for Congresswoman Marsha Fudge. The Congresswoman takes great pride in the diversity of her district and recognizes the importance of serving everyone. For those of you who don't know, the Congresswoman actually just joined the Congressional Asian Pacific American Islander caucus because she recognizes the importance of, the community and serving all of her constituency. In closing, I do just want to let everyone know that I did bring just a few brochures. It's a constituent services guide. So if there's ever a need where you need to communicate with the Congresswoman or express your needs, we encourage you to please contact her office because she would love to hear from all of you. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would love to welcome everyone here this morning. And just to let you know, my district is very diverse, and Asian Americans are among the fastest growing groups within my district. I believe their needs and concerns should be addressed by local, regional, state policymakers. I stand before you today to offer my support to promote better policy at the county level. And I would just like to thank you for the invite this morning, and I would look forward to the policy conversations that I'm here to hear. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Seda Radhika. This is a wonderful, beautiful facility. It's the first time since you finished it. I was here when it was a lot of dust and things, but it is a wonderful place, which is indicative of what we're trying to do and how this report reflects the potential of entrepreneurship, particularly in the Asian community. I am committed totally to being able to understand what kind of policy initiatives can be implemented. Not obviously, I'm the local official, so whatever City Hall can do, however advocacy I can do. I'm interested in being able to connect up between those, particularly those with language barriers, and how to better engage and intervene to be able to make it much more productive for their day-to-day living experience. I need to learn more, and this report will help me to do that. So I commend all of the sponsoring organizations. I read a little blurb in Plain Dealer yesterday. I'm excited about what I'm going to hear. And as my commitment to the Asia Town area which I represent, whatever I can do from investment, I will continue to do. And the more I know, the better I am to help to serve the Asian community. And let's get them all out to vote, because everyone needs to vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ariella, County Councilwoman Conwell, City Councilman Jeff Johnson, for your remarks this morning. At this time, I'd like to introduce Marita Dubanez, Director of Programs, if you could proceed up to the front, who is with the Asian American Justice Center. And while she's coming up to the front, I want to give a little bio on Marita. Marita, again, is the Director of Programs of the Asian American Justice Center, a member of the Asian American Center for Advancing Justice, and one of the key organizations that developed this report that we'll be presenting today. AAJC's mission is to advance the civil and human rights for Asian Americans and to build and promote a fair and equitable society for all. Prior to joining AAJC, Marita was Director of Legal Services at the Asian Pacific American Legal Resource Center in Washington, D.C. Her experience providing direct legal services to low-income communities also includes assisting labor pool workers as part of the Homeless Persons Representation Project in Baltimore, Maryland, and advocating on behalf of migrant and seasonal farm workers with Texas Rural Legal Aid. Marita received both her undergraduate and law degrees from the University of Michigan. And now, if you can give her a warm welcome, Marita.
Thank you very much, Michael. Oh. Press the button. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So thank you very much, Michael. I am honored and delighted to be here today to speak to all of you. I would sit at the podium, but I think we're going to do it like this. So again, thank you. So I'm here today to give you some highlights from the demographic report that you all have copies of. So this is a report that was produced by the Asian American Center for Advancing Justice, which is made up of the Asian Law Caucus in San Francisco, the APA Legal Center in Los Angeles, and the Asian American Institute in Chicago. And of course, Asia was one of our key partners in producing this report. So the purpose of putting together this report, we really intended this to be a resource for all of you. So we're providing the data in order to promote a more nuanced and sophisticated understanding of our Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities. And wherever possible, we really strove to be able to provide disaggregated data on the different subgroupings within the Asian American community, because often when we're only looked at as a total, a lot of the issues that our communities face are hidden when you look at us in the aggregate as opposed to in a disaggregated way. So just briefly, there is regional information in the report. We focus on the Midwest as a region, but we also dug in and highlighted 5 specific geographies in the Midwest, and Cleveland is one of them. So in case you're wondering, when we looked at Cleveland, we looked at this 7-county area. And then our data sources for the report, the majority of the information came from the 2010 census, as well as the American Community Survey, as well as a range of different federal data sources and state and local. This was an attempt to bring together a lot of disparate pieces of information so that you had it all in one source. So there's, again, a great deal of information in the report, but I'm going to focus on 3 specific themes here, 3 key findings from the report. So the things that we'd like you to take away are the dramatic growth experienced by our community, particularly in the decade between 2000 and 2010, the tremendous diversity within our communities, and our increasing civic engagement. So here's a map. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. It's a little fuzzy here, but it's in your book. So I'll just jump directly into the statistics on Cleveland. So There are about 67,000 Asian Americans and more than 2,200 NHPI in the Cleveland area, which makes the Asian American population here about 2% of the overall population and still less than 1/10 of 1% NHPI. The largest communities are Indian, Chinese, and Filipino Americans. And I think one of the most compelling statistics you'll see is that Asian Americans are far and away the fastest growing racial group in the Cleveland area, with a 42% increase between 2000 and 2010. So here's some more detailed information. So as I'm sure you all are aware, Cuyahoga County is home to the area's largest Asian American population, but we've also seen communities in other counties grow significantly over the past decade. So Portage County saw 84% growth in its Asian American community, Medina County 77% growth, and the NHPI population in Portage County grew significantly, 162% growth in the past decade. So here is a chart that shows the percent population growth by Asian American ethnic group. You'll see this chart on page 24 of your report, and it demonstrates what I'm sure many of you know is that a lot of the growth in the Asian American community has really been fueled by South Asian populations. So we've seen tremendous growth in the Sri Lankan, Bangladeshi, and Pakistani communities here in the Cleveland area. And this is actually reflective of trends in the Midwest and across the country. Oh, and one other statistic I did want to note is that nearly all of the Asian American communities in the Cleveland area have experienced significant growth in the past decade, which is a significant contrast to the declining numbers in Cleveland's overall population. So to briefly summarize, you see this in front of you, 42% growth in the Asian American community. Asian Americans and NHPI, the populations are growing in areas with already established communities and are also growing rapidly in areas where we are still emerging populations. And again, much of the growth has been fueled by growth in the South Asian. So that, very briefly covers the growth in our communities, but I also wanted to speak briefly about the social and economic diversity that we find in the Asian American community. So while many people within our community are enjoying economic success and stability, there are many that are still struggling. So I'm going to focus on some of the success stories. So on page 25 of your report, you'll see information about business owners and business growth. So this comes from the 2007 survey of business owners. And in that year, Asian American entrepreneurs in Cleveland owned more than 18,000 businesses, employing more than 51,000 people with an annual payroll of nearly $1.4 billion. So Asian American firms created more jobs and generated more payroll than businesses owned by any other racial group except whites. So while Asian American entrepreneurs are creating jobs and stimulating economic growth on one hand, on the other hand, there are, again, many people in our community who have been impacted by the economic crisis. So if you'll turn to page 31 of your reports, you'll see the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows that between 2007 and 2010, the number of unemployed Asian Americans in Ohio grew by an alarming 350%. So this is a rate significantly higher than every other racial group. And so if you look at the report at some of the other statistics we provide, you'll also see that there are corresponding increases in the numbers of Asian Americans living in poverty. You'll see that compared to other racial and ethnic groups, Asian Americans are not faring well. So I don't have time to get into all the data here, but you'll find a lot of those statistics in the report. So within all communities, but particularly in our community, we have observed that language barriers cut across different economic circumstances. Approximately 1 out of every 3 Asian Americans in Cleveland is limited English proficient and experiences difficulty communicating in English, which of course impacts their ability to access vital services. So there's a chart on page 28 that demonstrates the different rates of English proficiency within different racial and ethnic groups. And so I know many of you here are service providers and are, understand the importance of providing language access. So just to summarize, again, there are many people in our community that are doing well economically. There are others who are still struggling, and it is critical that we ensure that services are available even to those within our community who have limited English proficiency. So the last point that I will be presenting on today is about civic engagement. Obviously, everyone understands the importance of civic engagement, particularly at this time in our election cycle. So we know that Asian American and NHPI communities are among the fastest growing, but have we been able to translate that growth into increased civic engagement and greater political power? So the first step, one of the first steps to civic engagement, you'll be hearing more about this later, is the citizenship. In the Cleveland area, Asian American immigrants lag behind in terms of naturalization. Only about half of Asian American immigrants in this area are U.S. citizens, and the overall average is 57%. The NHPI community is faring a little bit better. 61% of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islander immigrants have become U.S. citizens. So that's some information on civic engagement. That's one, on naturalization. So, the next step will be voter registration. How are we looking there? Nationwide, as of 2008, only 55% of Asian Americans were actually registered to vote. So we know that across the country and here, many groups have been working to increase these numbers. We'll see how effective we've been at getting people to register and then turn out. We'll see that very soon. But it's clear that there's still a lot that must be done. It's really up to us to make sure that we're investing the time, effort, and resources to translate our community's tremendous growth into increased civic engagement and hopefully increased political influence. So I'll close with that. It's really up to all of us to make sure that the Asian American community is able to realize its full potential to influence public policies that will impact our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Before we go on to the next segment of our event today, I want to just briefly acknowledge all the guests in the room. We have many community leaders from the Asian ethnic communities as well as local political officials. So I just want to acknowledge those folks who are in the room today as well. As we move on from this point with Marina's presentation, we will do the first part of this two-part policy conversation. So if I can ask the folks to come up, Michael Fleming, Johnny Wu, and Radical Reddy to the stage, and then Rita will join us a little bit later again for the Q&A portion. And as they come up to the stage, I will briefly provide a little bio on each of the speakers that will be on the panel. Michael Fleming serves as the Executive Director of St. Clair Superior Development Corporation. He was formerly the Manager of Planning and Development for Midtown Cleveland, Inc., the adjacent Economic Development Corporation to the south. In addition to his work in urban redevelopment, Michael sits on the Board of Directors for Project Learn, an adult literacy organization, and has partnered with his family in renovation of a historic storefront property in Ohio City. He received his master's degree in urban planning, design, and development from Cleveland State University. Johnny Wu is currently in his 8th year as president of the Organization of Chinese Americans in Cleveland. In his profession, he is the owner of NPI Imaging, Media Design Imaging. He has helped consult as branding strategist for small to Fortune 500 businesses and nonprofits. In 2010, Johnny co-founded the Cleveland Asian Festival, which last year drew over 45,000 people over a two-day period. Johnny sits on several local community boards, including WBIZ, Idea Stream, and Cleveland Indie Club, to name a couple. Johnny has an MBA in brand marketing. Radhika Reddy is the founding partner of Area Ventures and has 30 years of management experience. Radhika advises the state of Ohio and the city of Cleveland on strategies to help companies export and market globally, to attract foreign direct investment to the region, and to assist global companies to relocate in the state. She was recognized by Inside Business as a 2009 Athena Award finalist for her outstanding accomplishments as a woman business leader. Ms. Reddy has a master's in accounting taxation from Cleveland State University and an MBA from Case Western Reserve. So now I'd like to go ahead and do a round of questions for our first group of panelists. Again, taking from the growth of the Asian community here in the greater Cleveland area and some of its implications for socioeconomic issues, I want to go ahead and throw a first question out to Michael Fleming of St. Clair CDC. And the question is St. Clair CDC has undertaken a master planning process with the Asia Town community. Could you provide some key points or highlights from the initial phase and what else to expect in the coming years?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. The Asia Town Master Plan is a response to a number of factors. Is that it really first started out with the recognition that there is an Asia Town here in Cleveland, and you can see on the map here that's posted that it runs roughly between East 30th and East 40th from Perkins up to St. Clair, with a couple outliers at Rockwell and a little bit further up 40th to encompass this fine center. A little over 5 years, we as an organization took to branding that neighborhood, which I think is a really key moment for it in the mind of the public. We did it through the Asia Town Cleveland website. We also did it through an actual logo creation, which I thought was pretty clever. And since then, I think that people throughout Greater Cleveland have finally started to recognize that there is an Asia Town here, and in fact, more so than they recognize that a St. Clair Superior is here, and that's pretty telling. So, the other thing that you're starting to see is more restaurants are opening up, which is, some people would say, hey, you're going to be taking from other restaurants that are already there, and that doesn't seem to be the case. We've just had 2 restaurants open in the last month alone, the Szechuan Gourmet and Emperor's Palace. And we've also seen clustering of restaurants. And if you go over onto Superior Avenue, within just 2 blocks there are 3 separate restaurants that are all specializing in Vietnamese noodle soup. And we're actually calling it Pho Ro, and I want to apologize. I do know that pho is a mispronunciation of the soup's real name, but this is how marketing works. So, branding aside, until now there was only anecdotal evidence that we had that the area was growing, and it's been very hard for us to prove that it's growing because it's in 7 separate census tracts, and those census tracts actually changed between 2010 and the 2000 census. But the evidence that we do see is that there's, number one, very low vacancy rates in Asia Town. There are some of the lowest foreclosure rates in the region. And in fact, it is the City of Cleveland's own master plan calls for additional growth in Asia Town despite lower expectations for virtually every community throughout the rest of Cleveland, with the exception of downtown and University Circle. So going forward, actually, this demographic study on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders in the Midwest really bears out our planning and strategy for growth in this neighborhood. As Marita said just a moment ago, that within the Midwest, there's been 47% growth within that decade. In Cleveland area, there's 42% growth, the highest of any racial group. And this is important because historically Chinatowns throughout the United States serve as a place that Asian immigrants go to first before they finally settle in the area. And once they are settled in the area, the Chinatown in that city will act as a central business district for the Chinese community or Asian community at large. And so because of that, we are predicting additional growth both in our Asia Town and obviously as a result of the Asian community's growth in the region. So this is what makes this Asia Town planning process so vital. But I think from a timing perspective, one of the key elements and I want to thank, because he's right here, but Councilman Jeff Johnson's support for this plan has been abundant, and he's been really driving the process. So I wanted to give a warm thank you to him for actually making this plan possible. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael, for that, for those comments. And I think what the Asia Town master planning process really highlights is that there's a tremendous amount of growing support not only in the broader community, but also within the Asian community. And so I wanted to move over to Johnny Wu to talk a little bit about the success of the Cleveland Asian Festival in its third year this year, and wanted to ask him briefly in terms of some key questions around the development of the Cleveland Asian Festival, and the fact that how did the community came together in 2010 to organize right here in the heart of Asiatown, and if you could take a moment to talk about the goals of the event and what's been the economic or social impact of the Cleveland Asian Festival.
I want to run this, I don't know it's off. So in 2009, a bunch of us sat together and with the councilman, and we thought the show should be something to do here in Cleveland to make it more exciting, more interesting for within the community. So we said, hey, let's put together the Cleveland Asian Festival. Let's see how far we can go with it. For the first year, we tried to want to minimize the amount of people the amount of time we had to spend, because it's the first time we do it for 2010. We asked all the different community leaders and different organizations to say, would you be able to participate and help us kick it off and make it exciting? For the first year, 2010, we did a one-day event and 10,000 people actually showed up. It was very exciting. So we sat down again and said, hey, can we do it again better for next year? Expanding the perimeters of the festival, expanding more places, adding more things to do, and make it a 2 days event. Although there was a talk about doing it for a whole week, but we said there's no way we can do that. Finally the idea came out to do it a 2 days event for the second year. It came out 31,000 people showed up for that, and it was a lot of excitement. So we said, let's make it a little bit better for the next year, for the third year event. So let's bring in more excitement. Let's hopefully to get 50,000 people to show up. Sure enough, we got 41,000. It's a little bit short of 50, but a lot of people show up. The weather was cooperating with us a lot, and it was a great event. The goal of the festival is very, very simple. The first thing to do is to bring awareness to the Asiatown neighborhood. So we know that there's this vibrant neighborhood that nobody knows about. It's a little hidden gem in this community. And when you talk to everybody outside this community, they don't know that it exists unless they actually come here and give a tour of this area. The next thing we want to do is reuniting and strengthening the communities within Cleveland to get all the Asian communities involved, get them all work together. We even reach out to Akron, to Oberlin, and so on to see to get everybody together to work and make it work. And at the same time, helping the community here in Asiatown that they can be able to raise more, get a more economic growth, so they can spend, have more clients come to their stores. Not only the festival, then after the festival, they can still continue coming. And obviously, the month of May is the Asian Heritage Month celebration. So we using also the month of May and decide to do the third weekend of every year to become a part of the event. The last event, we have very much a lot of information. So you can see on the screen here, about $1 million spent within the festival area for all the different people who came. 90% of vendors generate a higher sales volume. 85% of people stay more than 2 hours, and 75% of people spend more than $20 at the festival. And obviously you can see at the end there is about 80% of people first time coming to visit Asiatown. So hopefully that will happen better for the next year, which is May 18 and 19, 2013. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Johnny, for those comments. So in terms of the Cleveland Asian Festival's economic impact in the community, I think it's also important to share with you all in terms of our global reach and efforts here locally around international trade and economic development. So I want to just pass this question over to Radhika Reddy. There are a number of efforts here regionally to build and promote economic development. You are principal of Era Ventures. What are some global initiatives that you've undertaken and those others that you are aware of in the community?
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity for all of you to visit the Ariel International Center. 20 years ago, I came with $20 as an Asian immigrant from India. And because of education and all, and working hard about 80 hours a week, we were able to succeed and build this Ariel International Center. I wanted this to be an economic development tool to help other immigrant entrepreneurs, women-owned entrepreneurs, and minority entrepreneurs. So we have built this we are 100% women-owned, to help create an international business incubator, to also hold international events, and to market this region, Asia Town region, to the world, to India, China, other countries. We're looking to maybe acquire some of the warehouses in the surrounding areas, work with the Port Authority to try to create a foreign trade zone in the surrounding areas, because this is a great distribution hub. Warehousing in India is more expensive than warehousing here. You can get like for $3 a square foot. In India, it's $5. So we want to attract companies to come here, locate their offices here, have the warehousing distribution in the surrounding areas, and attract businesses. So our passion and mission of Aerial International Center is economic development through globalization. As a company, we do economic development finance, bringing together international finance and tax, economic development finance. So we are creating a fund to help immigrant or minority and women-owned entrepreneurs to help start up their companies if they're involved in international business. So it's not only attracting foreign companies to come here and contribute to economic development, but also local entrepreneurs, Asian immigrant entrepreneurs who want to start their own businesses. We have incubator plus shared services to help you grow successfully in the global markets. We are working closely with the state, with the county, with the city of Cleveland, as well as nationally on economic development finance issues. So we have a success story of bringing a German company. They opened their first North American office here in Cleveland and have moved manufacturing from Germany to Cleveland. And they've already added 4 or 5 jobs just in a few months, and they expect to grow a lot in this region. So with that, I just wanted to share some of the activity that we are doing here, as well as working with Michael, Councilman Jeff Johnson, Johnny Wu, with Michael Fleming of St. Clair Superior, to try to transform this Asia Town area, to bring companies, maybe try to create a walking path connectivity to the lake. So we are looking here to, down the road, have international restaurants downstairs, international restaurants and retail, with maybe 20 different countries showcasing their products from their countries. So it'll become like a mini international bazaar with international foods like Taste of Asia, Taste of Europe. So it becomes a one-stop center for events, businesses, retail. And that's kind of the thinking and planning for this region. And thank you, Councilman Jeff Johnson, Michael Fleming, and Michael from Asia, and Johnny Wu, everybody to helping do this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Renifer. So in this discussion around the economic development and our community's contribution, I think it's really also important to go back to what Marita had said about some of the challenges in terms of the fact that many of our communities have lost jobs during the economic downturn. So I wanted to, at this point, bring Tom Morosco, Director of Migration and Refugee Services from Cleveland Catholic Charities, to join the panel. While he's coming up to the stage, I want to briefly give his bio. Tom is the Director of, again, Cleveland Catholic Charities Migration and Refugee Services. It's the largest refugee resettlement organization here in Cleveland. Tom helped to found the Cleveland Refugee Collaborative, which brings together Cleveland's 3 refugee resettlement agencies and other refugee-serving organizations to strengthen services and policies for newcomers. Tom is also part of the Ohio Refugee Advisory Council, which helps to guide refugee service activities at the state level. Tom is a licensed social worker in the field of social work. All right, at this point, I would like to pass this question over to Tom. In terms of one of the key communities of Asian communities is the refugee populations from Bhutan and Burma. And over the last several years, the community has seen a large number of refugees from these countries. Could you share a little more about who they are, what are their numbers, and what are some of the challenges, jobs and health issues?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to speak on behalf of the refugees, who are a little bit different than your traditional immigrants coming to the Cleveland area. The refugee program is a federal program. administered at the executive level. Each year in the United States, about 65,000 refugees are invited to the U.S. Permanently. Different than other immigrants, refugees are offered benefits that usually immigrants are barred from, such as Social Security, Medicaid, welfare type of benefits, food benefits. In Ohio, over the last 5 years, and I use that 5-year point because that's when we started to see a large increase of refugees coming from countries in Asia, started really in 2007. Over the last 5 years, Ohio received about 9,000 refugees throughout 8 counties. The largest county that resettles refugees is Franklin, and then second is Cuyahoga County. Over that same amount of time, about 1,800 to 2,000 refugees have come to Cuyahoga County, spread out throughout the city, predominantly on the west side, from where our office is located, which is at 78th in Detroit into Lakewood, but also on the east side and in Parma. Of the countries, of those 2,000 refugees, about half of them are coming from Asian countries, such as Bhutan, Burma, Afghanistan, and along with them, other refugees come too from countries in Africa, the Middle East, and places like that. When they get here, it's always a challenge to find housing, jobs, and those kind of things. Finding safe and affordable housing throughout the community at a very quick pace. We have about a week to 2 weeks notice that a family's coming to convince a landlord to rent to us without a social security card, without a credit history, without a job. It's always a challenge, but luckily we're able to do that. Other challenges are just with the schools. The kids tend to arrive here with very limited English, so it's a challenge when they first get here. However, that's usually met pretty quickly. They adapt very quickly, much quicker than the parents. And then there's health issues that they arrive with. Getting caught up, as I like to say, playing catch up. They have to get all their immunizations. They have some nutritional type of issues that they have to be addressed when they get here. And all that takes time. The good news is, like Michael said, is that these challenges aren't met alone. There are 13 different organizations that are part of this collaborative, two of which are school districts, Cleveland and Lakewood schools, who really come to the aid of refugees and try to organize our services to meet things. And they include Neighborhood Family Practice, Asian Services, the 3 resettlement offices. So they work together in tandem really to just come up with answers, and when they see issues such as transitional type of things, getting acculturated to the norms here, they're able to help the refugees across that hurdle. The other thing is that, in the report it said that, I looked at a few countries in particular, like the Bhutanese refugees, and when it comes to them becoming citizens, there isn't a large spike in that. But I think this year we'll start seeing a difference because of when the refugees started coming in 2007, and then because of programs offered at Asian Services and Catholic Charities, we're able to promote the importance of becoming U.S. citizens and address some of those linguistical things to help them pass that test. So that number will increase of those who actually apply for U.S. citizenship and then actually get it. The other thing is that we've seen refugees also starting businesses and purchasing homes. And again, it takes a little bit of time, but once they're here, they do start to adjust. So I'm running out of time, but thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I want to thank Michael, Johnny, Radical, and Tom here on stage. And at this time, I'd like to have Eunice Park and V. Quinn come up to the stage. While Eunice and V come up to the front, the second part of the policy conversation will explore the growth of Asian American community and look at available services in the community to help the high percentage of foreign-born Asian Americans who want to become U.S. citizens. The growth of the number of new U.S. citizen potential for greater political clout, which may also influence upcoming contests such as the presidential elections. The other topic in the second part will look at groups like the Ohio Asian American and Pacific Islander Advisory Council. So just a little bit on Eunice Park. Eunice is legal immigration attorney at Asian Services in Action, where she also serves as a coordinator for the Northeast Ohio Citizenship Integration Project, NOCIP. NOCIP is funded by the Department of Homeland Security to assist lawful permanent residents to apply for citizenship and to offer citizenship classes. Her legal field of work also includes legal immigration matters pertaining to VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, and family-based immigration law. She's a graduate of the Cleveland State University, where she received her JD and Master's in Public Administration. V. Nguyen is an important leader in the greater Cleveland Asian community. He is one of the key founding members of the Cleveland Asian Festival and is the past president of Motivation's Young Professionals Group. V was appointed by Governor John Kasich to the Ohio Asian American and Pacific Islander Advisory Council, where he co-chairs the Culture and Education Committee. V is a Tar Heel, receiving both his undergraduate and graduate degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So for our communities, as we grow in numbers here, Marita had talked about the importance of the civic engagement and of our communities. And so I want to ask Eunice Park here to briefly describe the current citizenship program that is provided by Asian Services in Action and where people can go for additional information.
Yeah, I joined the Asia back in 2009 when I was a law student. And at the time, they've been doing this citizenship integration program funded by other different, like a private foundation. At the time, we were able to reach out to those like immigrant refugee communities in the Cuyahoga County as well as the Summit counties to promote the citizenship as well as to help with the environmental naturalization application process. And but luckily we were able to get this 2-year grant from the Office of Citizenship under U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, so that we were able to reach out to so far like more than 330 green card holders who are able to apply for citizenship. So from available services is we just try to offer various citizenship instruction classes in various locations. For example, like Cleveland Heights and also the west side of the Cleveland actually is located in Lakewood, and Cleveland office in Asia, as well as like some east side of the suburb area like a Solon. And we've served about like a 300 like a student. And I think we've been serving more than like 100 people who has a green card to apply for citizenship with a legal representation.
Right. Well, thank you, Eunice. So, V, I would like to ask V, who is one of the members of the Ohio Asian American Advisory Council, to briefly describe some of the key initiatives of the AAPI Advisory Council. Please.
Thanks, Michael. First off, the council was first appointed in March of 2010, and it's comprised of 11 Asian American leaders from across the state of Ohio. The council supports the AAPI community by advocating on behalf of Asian Americans, assisting and providing recommendations to state agencies, in addition to facilitating initiatives for the AAPI community. There are 4 committees that the council is made up of: economic and workforce development, health issues and healthcare systems, arts, culture, education, and civil rights and immigration impact. Most recently, the council released its mid-year report back in August 2012 that highlighted some of the trends that Rita talked about earlier related to the population and demographics of the state of Ohio. And then it also includes some accomplishments and goals of the council that included, in economic development. They met with, Jobs Ohio and Ohio Department of Development. The Health Committee, met with the Governor's Office of Health Transformation and talked about disaggregating data, as Marita mentioned, being able to really dive in and understand what are the health needs of each specific community. The arts and culture education, as Johnny mentioned, a lot of the members of the council are involved with both activities here in Cleveland, as well as there's a Columbus Asian Festival and a Cincinnati Festival as well, really to broaden the reach of our community. And then in civil rights, they're working on providing summaries related around protecting AAPI rights around housing, home ownership, and then the voting rights. A couple other events I wanted to highlight include back in June 5th at the Ohio State House, we held the 3rd annual legislative day that brought AAPI groups from Columbus, Cleveland, Dayton, Akron, Toledo, Cincinnati all together. And there were several hundred participants that turned out, and really to increase the visibility of the AAPI community and to really allow them to learn about how state government works and connect with their local officials. Then there were some breakout sessions also to discuss key topics. The other, I think, big accomplishment was the White House Midwest Regional Action Summit that we hosted down in Columbus on June 13th. And that was one of only 2 summits that held. The other was in Georgia and then here in Ohio, and it allowed members of the community, in the Midwest states to meet with members of President Obama's administration about issues that affected our community. Cabinet Secretary Chris Liu, along with Karen Ahuja, who's the Executive Director of the White House Initiative on AAPI, were able to come and lead the discussion. And there were some great breakout sessions that people were able to participate in and really learn about what's going on in each other's neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you, Dean. So I want to thank everyone again, also in the panel. Give them one round of applause. And at this point, if you're able to come to the stage, too, for our question and answer segment. So for those who have any questions or answers, please raise your hand and I'll point to you, and then I'll give you, please keep your questions very brief and specific so we can get through as many questions as possible. And please speak up loud.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Attorney Joseph Meisner, and I've worked with immigration since 1975, especially with the Indo-Chinese. In recent years, I've worked on tax issues, and this is with tax clinics that are especially trying to help ESL families understand their tax obligations. And one of the recommendations I like to ask people, especially those that know about this report, could it have been emphasized in the report that in civic engagement, one of the principal parts of that is contributing to the taxes that are paid, help our city of Cleveland, help our county, and help our government. So I was wondering, in terms of civic engagement, if there was some way to stress how much when new businesses are opened in Cleveland, that means workers, which means taxes for our city. When we have new businesses, that also means tax help for our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Marita, do you want to?
No, I think that's an excellent point, and there are many things that we would have liked to include in the report and emphasize, but unfortunately we're limited by space constraints. But I will take that point and we'll try to, take that into consideration as we do the next regional reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Please.
Belinda Prince from Congresswoman Budge's office. To Mr. Fleming or anyone else on the panel, maybe you may answer. Is there a component for residential growth around the marketing and growth of Asia Town, or, spontaneously or by design to increase the residential population?
The short answer is yes. The influence that we see right now, the greatest demand I would say we see right now is for artists to move into the neighborhood. And that's not inconsistent with Asia towns throughout the nation. What's interesting about it is that there's some fear that might dilute the nature of the Asia town. So it's not as Asian at the end of it, but they tend to meld pretty well. The other thing that I should say is that people have been saying that Asia towns or Chinatowns at the time would be dissipating, since I would say 1930s, and that hasn't happened. In a lot of cases, they've just grown stronger. So we are really, we really want that cultural identity to stay, and I think it's going to change. It'll evolve over time as we see Bhutanese coming into the community, for example, or other Asian influence. We saw that Pakistan and other groups from Asia were coming in much greater numbers now than some of the other groups. The Koreans is another one that we've been seeing lately. So that's going to change the nature of Asia Town. You see it reflected in the restaurants, and you see it reflected in the faces of the residents, and I think that's exciting.
Other questions?
Hi, Robert Smith from the Plain Dealer. Michael or Marita, what do you think accounts for the huge spike in Asian unemployment during the Great Recession?
Well, I think from my perspective as a executive director of the Asian Services in Action, I think one of the challenges is that we have a significant transient population, is my theory. That is that we have, say, Chinese community members that are here for limited term, and then if there aren't opportunities, they move on to other parts of the country. So that's just one guess, but I'll also open it up to other panelists if they have a guess at why there's such a dramatic spike.
The numbers that are pictured in the report, I think, are from 2007 to 2010, so that does coincide with the economic downturn. Why the Asian American community in particular has been so severely impacted, I mean, I'm not sure, but I do think, the numbers of people within our community who still have limited English proficiency, that obviously impacts one's ability to find a stable job. I would also say, some of the advocacy work that the Asian American Justice Center does and our colleagues that our Advancing Justice affiliates do is around employment discrimination. I know there have been studies that show that once Asian Americans become unemployed, they tend to be unemployed for longer periods of time than other people. So I think it's a confluence of many different factors. I can't say definitively, but I'm sure that all of that ties in.
Any other questions?
I think from what studies, my name is Cheryl DeMello, I'm a freelance journalist. From whatever studies I've read, the Asian Indian population does not tend to live together in an Asia town. So besides Radhika's presence here, do you see other Indians coming into the area, or do you cater to them outside of this development?
Does any of the panelists want to respond to that?
Maybe Michael Fleming?
I think from a planning perspective, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I think that that is a real phenomenon. I don't know why that is. I can say that, we've had, there's obviously Europeans tend to blend pretty well at the end of the day when it came to America, but we're talking about lands that are much more vast, with many, many more differences, both culturally and in appearance too. I think that makes it so that we're going to see certain groups come together and potentially others not. And I'm not sure. I know where they are in Northeast Ohio that there are smaller clubs of Indian clusters, I would say. And I don't know about the residents, but I'm more talking about the businesses. I'll know that I can go have great Indian food in Parma, and there's great Indian business right next to it. And but you're right, it's not the same. It doesn't cluster together the way that you will have this business district here that is in support of the greater Asian community. I can't tell you exactly why though.
No, that is a phenomenon, I think, all over the U.S. for the Asian Indian. But do you do any catering to them outside of this development? As you're specifically concentrated on this neighborhood here, and I'm Asian Indian, we're kind of not, I would say excluded, but outside that neighborhood.
Well, I think through our work with Radhika here, we actually plan on going after international businesses, and that's going to include Indian businesses as well. And I think that you're going to start to see that dynamic change. So once we start bringing more Indian businesses into the neighborhood, I think that you will see stores and restaurants as a result pop up as well to serve that community, and it might fill out that Asianness that we're talking about.
Thank you. Councilman Johnson, you had a question?
I have a couple questions. One, this is a regional report, and I looked on page 24 and I saw about 25 different groups. Is part of the goal here some way to connect them all, or simply to just be able to identify them? Because each and every one, we cannot assume that all 25 are going to be walking together with the same policy initiatives. Tell me kind of your goal, given the fact you've got so many different subgroups. And I'm interested in getting they're not all existing within Cleveland proper, obviously. So from a regional standpoint, this is, first of all, the report is very good for me as a policymaker. It gives me an idea of what's out there. But give me a sense of how you deal with so many subgroups and what kind is the goal beyond awareness when it comes to the subgroups. Anybody?
Well, I know that Marita may be able to respond. I don't know if V also, I mean, I'll let Marita speak, but if V wanted to talk about kind of the Pan-Asian kind of goals of the advisory council, do you want to speak on that just briefly?
Well, definitely, I mean, the council, we look to reach out to all the communities. And when we have, like the White House Regional Action Summit, you know, we're able to hear from these small communities that may not exist in Cleveland, but they're able to voice their experience to us at the state level. So we know they exist. I'm struggling to remember the exact community that I didn't know existed in Cleveland, and it was great to hear their experience in the state of Ohio. They were in the Columbus area. I'm trying to remember.
Are you talking about the Bhutanese?
Maybe, yes, possibly, yeah. So it's just interesting to see, and then so by doing that, you know, we understand their needs, and we're able to hopefully give them a voice at a state level where they might not have previously.
And Marita?
Just want to add, because like Asian community is very diverse, just for the fact that they're from one country, that doesn't necessarily mean that they share all the language together. So in terms of like developing language access policy, it would be really important to kind of try to understand all the diversities really present, you know, even though they're like country of origin to like a certain country.
I struggle a little bit with your question because we recognize that sort of the Asian American identity is a construct, right? So it's not as though by talking about the Asian American community, we want to break apart the idea that it's a monolithic entity. We know there are a lot of differences in the community. And I think really the purpose of this report was to try to highlight some of the distinctions between the different communities and increase awareness about particularly some of the smaller groups. But at the same time, it's clear that there are still a lot of commonalities in sort of the Asian American, the immigrant experience. And yeah, so I mean, we call it the title of the report is a community of contrast for a reason, right? We really want to make sure people understand the tremendous diversity within the community, but at the same time still understand some of the shared experiences.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? We have
a
second question. Go ahead.
First of all, in response to that, reports like this, like this report is a step toward empowerment. And this is valuable in that it allows us, those who are in positions, whether it's Ms. Conwell or myself, to actually, the next steps are what I'm interested in, helping to identify where they are, where they're living. I realize that in Asia Town, I'm not dealing with 25 subgroups as I plan for the next 10 to 20 years. And so your statistics relative to the subgroups that are in Cleveland proper are relevant to my job, being able to deal with unemployment and the other issues. So the next steps would be helpful from a policy standpoint for you to help, and next maybe in phase 2 to help me understand what the best practices are within these different municipalities, who's doing something better than others, help us to. So I think there's a good phase 2 that I want to be a part of that helps me to move into policy initiatives, as well as stabilizing Cleveland proper's population, because as Mr. Herman always pushes, immigration is one of the key areas of stabilizing Cleveland Central City population. And this is a step toward that direction as I see it. And so I appreciate it.
Thank you for that comment. We have opportunity for 2 more questions. Go ahead with that.
One quick one. My name is Stanley Miller. I'm a pastor of Nottingham United Methodist Church. When I sit on a board of Global Cleveland, my executive director is hiding behind the pole. There we go. And I guess my question is, having looked at the history of this city and this great country, and understanding the beauty of different cultures, is there going to be a follow-up discussion to move towards blending various cultures that are in Cleveland together? And if so, how does Global Cleveland and this project work together to make that happen?
Hi, I'm too on the board of Global Cleveland, and I'm also on the board of Worldwide Intercultural Network. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is to create an intercultural dialogue series, to have monthly meetings. December 12th, we're going to have an event for all different ethnic groups to showcase their cultures, have a table to exhibit. It's being hosted by Mayor Jackson at the City Hall. So we are very actively promoting, and the city of Cleveland is very supportive. Valerie and Ramiro and the mayor. So this is our third annual cultural diversity. So that's kind of one of the actions. Global Cleveland also at their end are doing a lot to attract individuals to this region. So we feel it's coming. You're seeing a lot of events, and we can keep you in the loop. And Dan Hansen has clevelandpeople.com. He's got how many communities that you've got?
About 87 right now.
87. He's got ambassadors from each, and he's got a fantastic database. So we're trying to bring all resources together, and we're planning to host events here to showcase different cultures in this. Our dream is to have 117 ethnic groups, have one event every day so we can showcase a different country every day. That's kind of one of our missions.
Thank you so much. Is there one final question out there in the audience? Go ahead.
Yeah. My name is Pierre Bijani. I'm the editor and profile news Arabic English newspaper. Also, I'm the president of the Cleveland American Middle East organization. As in support of Councilman Johnson, looking at the report of different ethnic groups, I haven't seen the Middle Eastern community included, even though we are a part of the Asia. I don't know if this is only for the Asian Pacific region or just for the Asia at all. And when you have all different ethnic groups, how come the Middle Eastern, the Arabic Middle Eastern community wasn't included in that report?
I think that's a great question. I think Rita can probably respond to that.
I agree, it is a great question. We actually rely on, I think, the Census Bureau's definition of Asian American and the countries of origin that encompasses, and it doesn't include the Middle East. So I totally understand it is an oversight that we did not include that in the report. It just wasn't in the parameters of what we were doing at this time. It's a very small piece, but we actually did make a point of including in the profile on Detroit a little bit of information about the Arab American Museum there to point out that there is a large and growing Arab American community in the Midwest, but again, that was beyond the scope of what we were able to do in the report.
Well, I want to again thank the panelists here as well as our special guests for attending this event this morning. Before we adjourn, I want to just point out that extra copies of the report are available at the registration table. Take as many as you want. Please, I encourage you to distribute that to others that might be interested in the key findings of the report. In addition to that, at the registration table, there'll be some information in terms of the Governor's Advisory Council, the report that was put together during Governor Ted Strickland's administration, as well as the mid-year report from Governor John Kasich. And lastly, there's some additional information on different organizations and resources at the table. And you can also find this demographic report online, and the web address is www.advancingjustice.org. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending this morning. It's certainly very cold out there still, so please drive safely back home. Thank you so much.
Whoever you vote.